So in this video, I'm going to be giving my rankings of all 9 episodes of Season 1 of Marvel's What If. This is a series that I always had some interest in watching based on the trailers, but I was never super anticipating it. But after watching the entirety of Season 1, it did leave quite the impression on me, and so I'm going to be doing a ranking of all 9 episodes from least favorite to my favorite in terms of my personal preference. Captain Carter. This was episode 1 of Marvel's What If, showcasing what would happen if Peggy Carter got the super soldier serum instead of Steve Rogers. Overall, this was a pretty predictable episode in terms of its execution, as it really sort of played out like an episode of the show Agent Carter, but of course it was showcasing Peggy becoming Captain America. The best things about the episode was definitely seeing Steve Rogers get the Mark I Iron Man suit, and that's how he helps fight. I like that they got Haley Atwell to come back as Peggy Carter, and I did like that it showed that Peggy and Steve still would have had like a little romance, even if Steve didn't get the super soldier serum. Overall, this was a solid introduction, a good introduction to Marvel's What If, but of course it was far from being their best episode. Episode 6. What if Killmonger rescued Tony? This episode was sort of a continued showcase of the kind of character that Killmonger is when it came to seeing sort of his planning, his intelligence, his ruthlessness, and his serious drive for revenge. And we saw that his presence in Iron Man 1 would have severely altered what would have happened during the course of that film. Besides that, this episode sort of lacked the wow factor that some of the other better episodes had when it came to either being like really funny or a fun adventure, or having sort of that serious like dark tone or dark ending. Really, the episode was really sort of like Killmonger's showcase, which was solid and well done for what it was. Episode 4. What if Doctor Strange lost his heart instead of his hands? This episode plays on what the title suggests, where Doctor Strange loses his girlfriend Christine to the car crash instead of losing his hands. While it's an interesting question to ask, I thought the execution through most of the episode, it was just okay. I didn't think it was great, I didn't think it was bad, it was just kind of like there. Writing-wise, while I'm willing to let a lot slide with these what-if scenarios, I thought the fact that the whole scenario or movie Doctor Strange played out the same way, even though he didn't lose his hands, was a little silly and a big kind of stretch. The episode, the great part of it comes with the ending, where the episode has a truly dark, twisted ending, with Doctor Strange becoming quote-unquote evil, consumed by the power, which leads to him into accidentally destroying the whole universe, and the closing remarks from the Watcher are just like, wow, that's really kind of dark stuff. It was a really great ending, and what I thought was just a solid episode overall. Episode 3, The Death of the Avengers. I really liked and enjoyed that this episode played up on something that goes overlooked in the timeline of the MCU films, and that's the fact that Iron Man 2, The Incredible Hulk, and Thor all take place at the same time and overlap each other. I really like this episode placed an emphasis on that. But besides that, this episode was sort of a well thought out mystery story playing up on phase 1 of the early MCU. And to see the Avengers get picked off one by one, it really had me engaged to be like, who the hell is behind all this stuff? Spoiler alert, when the ultimate reveal that it's Hank Pym behind all this stuff, it really did make me question what exactly is the catalyst for these what-if events, but regardless, it was a well thought out mystery story that had me engaged all throughout the episode. Episode 5, What If Zombies. This episode showcases a zombie apocalypse that comes into the MCU as a result of Janet Pym bringing with her a zombie sort of virus after she comes out of the quantum zone. What's cool about this episode is that it sort of played out like a traditional kind of fun zombie apocalypse type of movie instead of our MCU characters fighting a zombie apocalypse. What's cool about the zombies is that the zombies still have the same sort of powers that our regular heroes had. So zombie Doctor Strange can still use the portals, zombie Scarlet Witch still has her sort of like telekinesis and mind warping powers. All that kind of stuff made sort of like a fun sort of like survival film. And what's cool about was that the episode really sort of played up and sort of pushed the limits on sort of like the violence that maybe like Disney Plus would allow them to, with stuff like Captain America getting like cut in half, Sharon Carter's zombie getting basically like exploded. Overall, it was a pretty cool zombie apocalypse kind of film that still was sort of light in tone, that was fun, and of course delivered on a really kind of effed up ending. Episode 7. What would happen if Thor was an only child? When you ask the question, what would happen if Thor was an only child and didn't have Loki as his adopted brother, I never would have imagined that the scenario that would play out would be him being an overconfident, party-throwing douchebag. But God bless it for it, just because this episode was so goddamn entertaining. I mean, the character dynamics and the writing and the humor that we saw was on a perfect continuation of the kind of stuff we saw in Thor Ragnarok, one of my favorite MCU films. And just to see stuff like sort of the classic hangover scenario playing out in the Las Vegas hotel, the kind of parties Thor was throwing, all of the sort of cosmic, intergalactic MCU characters that came down to Earth and were having just like a great time, like Surtur, seeing the Frost Giant Loki and Thor having a fun, brotherly, like real kind of friend dynamic. And not to be overlooked is that I think this episode made great use and is the best use of Captain Marvel so far during her time in the MCU, where sort of her overpoweredness plays better when it's more in sort of like an oppositional kind of role, and that works out a lot better. And seeing the fight between her and Thor was pretty badass, and seeing who could get the upper hand on both, because these are both probably the most powerful characters or most powerful heroes in the MCU. So overall, this was a super entertaining episode that had some great humor, fun character dynamics, and just put a smile on my face as I was watching it all the way through. Episode 9. What if the Watcher broke his oath? Going into Marvel's What If, I had the expectation that it would be a series of standalone anthology stories told by the Watcher. Well, for the most part, that's what it was. But I never had the expectation that all of these stories would connect into forming some grand epic that we saw in this episode. But it truly was something special to watch, to see this intergalactic or multi-universe Avengers team, the Guardians of the Multiverse, come together with all the characters that we saw from the previous episodes. So Captain Carter, Star-Lord T'Challa, Party Thor, Doctor Strange Supreme, and the whole rest of them, even Killmonger, team up to fight the big bad Ultron was great and necessary, just because we saw what a big bad and badass Ultron had been in the previous episode and the start of this episode. So that was really cool to see. Much of the episode focused on action, but they still managed to keep true to the humanity behind these heroes, and we got to see some cool new relationships form and develop, just like the stuff we saw with Star-Lord T'Challa and Killmonger. That was a very interesting dynamic to see formed in this episode. Really cool to see these stories come together and form one big epic, and to see all the stories represented in some way, all the episodes of What If, even if some were only for a brief moment or towards the end. In the end, I think it was a real accomplishment what they were able to pull off here, in making it feel sort of like a grand saga, even though it's a storyline we'd only been following for a few weeks. But I think they really accomplished something really special with this particular episode, as appropriately so, because it was the season finale of What If. The only sort of fail or misfire in the episode is that the version of Gamora that we saw, the version that had killed Thanos in her universe, had very little screen time, little dialogue, and was just kind of there on the team. You know, she was just there to fill a role of providing a resource to sort of defeat Ultron, and that's it. It sucks because I was really interested in what kind of dynamic her character had going on, because she was on the main poster for the series, but I guess they only had so much time to do stuff, as this episode was pretty damn action-packed. Star-Lord T'Challa. This was episode 2 of What If, and this episode left quite the impression on me when I saw it, as it was just an amazing showcase of what just an amazing character T'Challa was. I mean, to see the impact that he had on the whole galaxy with him just as in the role of Star-Lord just blew me away, with the obvious highlight being the effect he had on Thanos. I mean, that was something truly just special and awesome to see. And the other characters, like Nebula, it was like, wow, T'Challa is just like a godly, just amazing kind of guy. The writing appropriately sort of mimicked the humorous tone of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, but besides just being sort of a fun story and episode, the episode also had a lot of heart, with a story about coming home, the relationship with his father, his relationship with his family, the other Ravagers. I mean, the episode just had a lot of good writing and stuff like that. It was also cool to see the Collector in more sort of a real kind of villainous role, and him being a real badass. Yeah, this episode was just a great episode, and definitely a major highlight of Marvel's What If. All, of course, highlighted by the fact that this episode, and surprisingly a few of the other episodes afterwards, were the last time we'll get to hear Chadwick Boseman as T'Challa. Episode 8. What If Ultron Won? Age of Ultron is no one's favorite Marvel movie. Well, definitely not a bad movie. The movie wasn't quite able to reach the heights that many people had after the first Avengers movie, and a common complaint was Ultron himself. While not a bad villain, he couldn't quite match the sort of sinister and dark expectations many were hoping for to take the sequel to the next level. This episode almost feels like an entire apology for Age of Ultron, because it basically is, showing the damage that Ultron was able to do had he succeeded in taking over the Vision's body or acquiring the Vision's body. And my god, the chaos and destruction, it truly is the real Age of Ultron, just with the stuff he's able to do on Earth alone. Once he gets the Infinity Stones, my goodness, he goes to absolute god status, GOAT status, when it comes to being the GOAT, greatest of all time, when it comes to Marvel villains. Seeing what he did to Thanos, the destruction he was able to bring to the entire universe, he's really just so goddamn sinister, and the voice acting returning from James Spader for Ultron was just incredible. Even more incredible was the stuff he did to the Watcher and the position that we saw the Watcher in this episode. The fact that the Watcher, for the first time ever we saw, was put in an uncomfortable position with Ultron being able to sense his presence. That led to a great second half of the episode where Ultron was basically going after the Watcher and seeing them battle through multiple different universes. The Watcher trying to help Natasha and Hawkeye along to sort of get the information they needed to defeat Ultron. It was truly a dark, powerful, and just amazing episode, just putting Ultron just in an amazing new light, making me never sort of look at Ultron the same way again after this episode. It doesn't quite make up for the fact that we got the sort of the version of Ultron we got in the movie in Avengers Age of Ultron, but for what we got in this episode, it makes me appreciate that this particular episode as my favorite so far of the What If series. So there you have it with my ranking of all 9 episodes of Marvel's What If. To sum things up, at number 9 I have Captain Carter, at number 8 Killmonger Saves Tony, at 7 Doctor Strange Supreme, at number 6 Death of the Avengers, at number 5 Marvel Zombies, 4 Party Thor, at 3 Guardians of the Multiverse, 2 Star-Lord T'Challa, and at number 1 Vision Ultron. I thought this series was way more engaging than I thought it was ever going to be. I thought it was just going to be sort of like a cute, kind of entertaining, sort of one-off kind of thing, but sort of the epic story that they created, I never saw coming. And thankfully, I guess that's because I didn't really study the trailers too much, just because this series was a real surprise, and I really enjoyed what it brought to the table, and hopefully more like stuff like this is to come in the future. So that'll do it for this rankings video. If you made it to the end, thank you for watching.